Well, this is 4 of 5. So an acquaintance of mine had heard something about Nathan chasing horse, and she was an artist. I went to high school with her, and she made a comment about the time she lived in Ontario. She took sketches in courtrooms, and she mentioned she had drew criminals, like really horrific trials, like murder trials. And she said that she could understand why I'd like to go to Las Vegas to bear witness to the crimes that he's committed. And she made a comment that there are very few people who can see a person for who their souls really are. And she commented a compliment saying that I could see who Nathan Chasing Horse's soul was, and that how frustrating it must have been for me to really see who he was and know the damage he was going to cause, and nobody was going to listen to me, and that how frustrating it must have been for me. And I made a comment. I said, well, it has to do with a lot of childhood trauma and how children who've grown up with it, one alcoholic parent or two, or just the whole nature of suppressing feelings, and they end up trauma bonding in relationships. They end up suppressing that as well. And a lot of the women who needing help with their daughters 19 years ago were looking to bond with their children, their daughters. Like today, how moms want to bond with their daughters and they buy tickets for Taylor Swift. And that's what the moms were wanting, to bond with their daughters in with sweats and Sundance. So it was cultural. I mean, there's been decades of people who use sweats and Sundance in restorative justice. And in March, when I spoke to one of the moms who was an addictions counselor, I said, this is what my niece disclosed. He's a danger. And she made comment that she had talked to a medicine man in Saskatchewan who said it was okay to forgive men like that. Now, I know there are other stories of men like Nathan Chasing Horse who've gone to court in Ontario, all across Canada, and when they're being sentenced, they hold an eagle feather. Like, that's disgusting. Okay, so I can anticipate what's going to happen in Las Vegas. Now, both my parents are survivors of Indian residential school. My grandmother was as well. And I know how hurt they were. I know thousands of children were traumatized. Thousands saw horrific things and were silenced, couldn't talk about the abuse they saw. These are children. You know, in the terms of consent, that how do you comprehend that? That stays with them throughout their lives. Now, throughout my life, I've been integrated in the Calgary school system. And for me, my community lives right by a major city. So being bussed into the city and bussed out, like for me, losing my language and my culture, yet at the same time, I gained something as well. So the basis of what I've learned and what I've seen, and talking about my own experience, I say these things because I've experienced them. Seeing men in positions of power, wanting to have some control over women, and also women wanting to lift up their husbands by keeping their secrets, like lateral violence. There's a lot of women that were lost their status, a lot of women that were silenced. The caste system in Canada, where you have the white people, then you treaty people, and then you had untouchables. And the untouchables were the Sioux, the Métis, and the Inuit. And for people saying, what? I said, yeah, 260 years that Canadians did not recognize Sioux people as being Indigenous to Canada. And only this year have they been making amends to the Sioux, the Inuit, and the Métis. That's a long time. I grew up in a treaty community because my grandmother married a treaty. My mother married a treaty. If I had married a Sioux, a white man, a Métis, or Inuit, I would have lost my status. So there's a lot to look at in terms of, what is it that I chose and why I chose to live the life that I chose to keep my voice. In a way, when Nathan came into the picture and he didn't have an elder with them, and restorative justice is based on community support and knowledge keepers of elders overseeing all these things, ceremonies and things that happen within the community, because we know our communities. So my mother was literate in Sioux, and the same with my grandfather and my great-grandmother from Minnesota. They could read and write in Sioux. So when Nathan attempted to write in Lakota, or even how he spoke, the critique was that he couldn't speak good Lakota, and he wasn't literate. So I knew what traditional means. I've had traditional uncles who were in trouble with the law, and they practiced restorative justice, trying to help young people to not have recidivism once they left prison system. And at the same time, that doesn't work for people. For me, my opinion was that, like, Nathan was an actor, a very poor actor in the films. In real life, like he was a narcissist, no feelings, none whatsoever. Total. I don't know his I know I could have another series of talks about his childhood. But for me, as an Indigenous woman, I wanted to make sure that they had female content in Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, as well as to have culture like music. It's one thing to have Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee having the language, but at the same time too, it was important to have a woman's voice as well as music. So the promotion and trying to help him, restart his career. My mother and I advocated for him, but he was pitiful, and in our culture, Ushaka, we lift them up. But I wouldn't waste my words on him. I've chosen my battles. It's taken me 19 years to live this long, to know that he's going to court. There's a potential he'll serve the rest of his life in prison. I don't know what's in store for myself, but I do know that there are many young men and women like Nathan Chasing Horse who come into First Nations communities and exploit us. They exploit, and I caution to people, watch the Fifth Estate. Listen to the witnesses, listen to their stories, and see how devastating somebody like Nathan Chasing Horse comes into a community and destroys the life of innocent children. I grew up and I worked in a state hospital, and I saw high-risk girls who'd been victims of sexual assault, and how they had to be institutionalized to save their lives, either by the courts or their families. I know we don't have that, and I keep repeating that. But, the reality of it is, my niece lost her life 3 years ago. And I know there are other stories of other Indigenous girls in Montana and other places who've attempted to kill themselves because of what he did to them. I don't mean to trigger you. If you are triggered, please seek help at a helpline. Thank you.